What are some things that you think will be challenges for both teams to be able to win tomorrow? What will you be looking for in terms of offense and defensive plays?
Explosive plays for both. Neither of these defenses have given up any. I think how people define explosive plays differently, but basically I think Georgia's given up 2 all year and Alabama's given up 3. Georgia hasn't allowed a touchdown yet, and Alabama's routinely scored touchdowns from 50 yards out. So I think whoever can get those chunk plays to help their drives along, and maybe whoever can stop them or limit them, that's a really big deal in this game in my judgment. And Georgia is still looking for players to provide those. They have guys who are capable for sure. I mean, it's not like just because Lab McConkey and Brock Bowers are gone that they suddenly just have a bunch of intramural guys running around out there. They've got dudes. It's just a matter of they haven't necessarily made as many. They made some. They haven't made as many big plays as you might expect.
Who do you think this is a bigger game for? I know you just mentioned Kalen Deboer, but what about Kirby Smart? Do you feel like there's more pressure since Saban's gone now and he's going up against Deboer?
I think that's part of it, not just because it's Deboer, because the thing that people shouldn't underestimate, this is not Kalen Deboer's first rodeo. It might be at Alabama. A guy coached in the national championship game last year. He's 12-2 against ranked opponents. He knows what he's doing, and he knows how to handle a big game. I was at the Washington-Oregon game last year. I know people in the South might not believe that was a big-time field. That was an electric environment with a lot of pressure, and he knows how to navigate those games, so he'll be fine. That said, there is a transition, any way you want to look at it. And I think because of the transition, it does put a little more pressure on Georgia. They are the established power. Their systems are in place. There's no transition. So I think from that standpoint, there's probably a little more pressure on Georgia to win the game when you combine that with their schedule. Alabama's got a tough schedule as well, but Georgia still has to go to Texas. They've still got to go to Ole Miss. They've got Tennessee coming in. So it would probably put a little more pressure on Georgia, especially given the fact that they don't have the margin for error as they haven't changed coaches and changed schemes and all of those things that Alabama's doing.
What's it like for you preparing for this game with Coach Saban now on your team? How has he added or changed to your preparation?
Oh, well, I mean, we always try to prepare thoroughly, but what Nick has brought is a dynamic that this show or any show has never really had. And, his number one, he's a gifted communicator no matter what. Obviously, he is a football expert and legend. So there's an XO component and a recency to being at the height of his career to coming to TV that I don't think anybody's ever had in TV before. And him being able to do that and the way he can communicate things and his willingness to be candid and his ability to break things down, I don't say he makes it simple, he makes it understandable, which is really the mark of a great communicator. So he's been absolutely terrific. He's funny. He brings ideas in the meetings. He busts people's chops. He takes it when you give it to him back. He's been tremendous. Just an amazing teammate.
What's the biggest thing that you've learned?
What's what now?
What's the biggest thing you've learned from Nick over the course of his time there, whether it's X's and O's, whether it's about college football?
Well, I think we were just talking about it and doing the film room. You have a tendency, if you're not a coach, you watch certain things and maybe you think you're smart, maybe you watch something other than just the ball. But he shows you different things to watch. It's just matter of fact and just the way he views the game. But now you'll catch yourself saying, oh, okay, he talked about, watching this guy being accountable for the quarterback, or this guy immediately when he steps out of the box. Now the quarterback knows it's a quarterback draw now. Things like that that you learn. And I think just also being appreciative for the passion he has for the sport at large. We're gonna have a discussion tomorrow about the situation at UNLV with Matthew Sluka, the quarterback who left. And based on what we've all talked about earlier, it's going to take a broader context than just a guy leaving his team. It's like, what are we going to do in college football to kind of take care of this? And he's been so involved in all of that. I mean, you learn a lot about his passion and care for the game at large, and not just the team that he once coached.
What about for this game in particular? Is there something that he showed you, or something that you're looking at in this game that maybe Nick Saban kind of said, hey, make sure to watch this in terms of matchup to watch?
I mean, not yet, but I mean, the biggest thing is what we just did is talking about how will Georgia handle the threat of Jalen Milroe running. You know, not just when he runs, you've got to handle that for sure, but then there are other times it puts stress on Georgia's defense just because he can't. And he's also a very good passer. So those are the types of things I think that he's been focusing on up to this point.
How'd you feel to be back in Tuscaloosa in some ways? Is it like coming home to you?
Oh, sure. I mean, you know, University of Alabama has been really important to me and good to me over the years. And, you know, when you come back, there are a lot of memories. You see a lot of friends, and, you know, people are kind enough to want to come down to the show. And, you know, I'm excited to see some people that you don't get to see regularly. So it's always fun to come back to a place that feels like home.
Is this one of the more unique marquee matchups that you've covered, and just in terms of lack of maybe household names? I know there's a few of them, but it seems like there's less so than maybe in a normal top 5 matchup.
I'm not sure I agree with your premise. I mean, I think college football fans, I mean, you know, Milroe and Beck were already big deals. I think, you know, Malachi Starks from Georgia is a guy who was a highly recruited guy. He's pretty well known. So I think this is a great matchup because it's a rivalry that's sort of born of excellence. Because growing up, you know, in the state and following Alabama football, Auburn and Georgia were rivals. They played every year. Alabama and Georgia didn't play every year. But in, you know, since the time Nick arrived, and really a few times before that, the stakes are always pretty high, you know, when they play, it seems. So I don't know. I think it's big because of the excellence that the two have exhibited over the last several years, but I don't know that I look at it as some mystery in terms of, you know, people knowing the players or anything, if I didn't misunderstand your question.
Have you gotten a chance to talk to Coach Saban about who he might be picking tomorrow?
I don't ever ask him that because, you know, he should just pick who he thinks is going to win. And I know that sounds cliched and trite, but I really think that's important for all of our analysts. You know, if he were just going for, you know, either the response to the crowd, he would pick Alabama. If he's going for the big overall, I'm going to call this like I see it, even if he doesn't think that, you know, picking Georgia would be the way to go. So you can't win on that either way. So you might as well just say what you think. And, you know, I'm confident he'll do that. He hasn't hesitated to do that in any facet of his life for the entire time I've known him. So I imagine he'll just say who he thinks is going to win. Let the chips fall where they may.
Can you give us any hint of who the guest picker will be?
Julie? Not yet? Have we announced it yet?
Not yet. It'll be announced in 2 hours.
2 hours. In 2 hours, someone will tell you.
You talked about you've seen Kalen in these big games before. You probably knew him better than most people in the South before this, kind of just the pulse of the college football landscape. What was your initial reaction to Alabama hiring him and kind of how he would step in and replace Saban?
The number one, first of all, you got to be a great coach to be willing, and you have to be confident in your abilities to step in and follow in Nick's footsteps because he's the greatest coach who ever lived. All due respect to Coach Bryant, who was awesome for sure. To me, the greatest college coach in the history of sports, Nick Saban. And you've got to be very confident to be willing to take that on. I didn't know Kalen well, didn't know him at all prior to our trip to Washington last year, and obviously I had no inkling that he would someday be the Alabama coach. But what I did say to people is, I've got to work to develop a relationship with this guy because as long as he's at Washington, they are going to be good. You know, because he's won everywhere he's been, tremendous coach, gets the most out of his players, creative. But I mean, just the way he's carried himself and having been respectful to what has been accomplished here by Nick, by Bear Bryant, by Coach Stallings, you know, by everybody here, yet still being confident enough to listen to the players, the things they want to keep that fit within his vision, and then implementing the things that he thinks are important because of his success. So I think it was the perfect choice. Not that there aren't other elite coaches out there, but I think his demeanor and his confidence and his track record made him an absolutely perfect hire that Greg Byrne pulled off. Good? That's all we do. All right, guys. Oops, I've got microphones to give back.
Oh, we're good here. Reece is getting shorter on me. What we got?
How excited are you to be in Tuscaloosa?
Super fired up. You know, it's one of those games you saw before as the schedules came out. It's like, yeah, I think there's a good chance that we'll be in Tuscaloosa for that one. But, you know, everybody makes a big deal about the playoff, and games aren't as important as they were with a 4-team playoff. I don't believe that. Both teams need to know what they have, and they're going to be challenged in ways that only these two teams can challenge each other. So I think it's interesting, the narratives of how good Alabama looked their last game out and how not good Georgia looked. So plenty to prove for the road team. We know the history there. We know that there's a different coach on one side. So as excited as we've been for a game. But again, like going back and knowing that these two teams are going to play a regular season here and we're going to be in the top 5 is awesome.
It's almost been 2 decades since Alabama was a home dog.
Yeah.
Were you surprised to see, I don't know if it moved or not, but were you surprised to see them start out at least as a home dog?
Not surprised. Like when you think about it and you knew what Georgia had coming back and you thought about the coaching change, I don't think it was a surprise. It was just like, hey, this could be a possibility. And then you do the math, and it is 2007. It's like, wow, Coach Saban's first year. You know, those times were different then. You know, it's a little different, but I really think it's a pick'em game. Both teams are more than capable of what they've shown. Georgia obviously getting healthier and having guys that they didn't have against Kentucky. Alabama, I think, really showed what they thought they were going to have. You know, going into week 1. They didn't have the offensive line until that game in Madison, where you have Pritchett at right tackle, and then you have Proctor at left tackle, and Booker's in his spot. Brailsford's been awesome as a fill-in. Looked like he's put on some pounds, which I thought was going to be a key, because he did play pretty light last year in Washington, and knowing the size of the guys he's going to take on in this conference, but he's been spectacular. He really has. I think he's gotten better every game. So that it makes sense, but again, I think I saw it already went down to 1 this morning. So I mean, if it keeps coming, a home team, people love that stuff. So I could see it being a pick'em, but that's the way I have it.
How difficult is it to evaluate too when you kind of look like both teams might be holding a little bit back, and we haven't seen a full healthy side on each one, and maybe they're holding some back, you know, from the start of that season?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's really tough going back and watching the tape of Georgia. You know, the offense is there. You know, you get backed up, you're trailing, you're on the road, your defense doesn't have everybody, but they battle their butts off to keep them in the game, and then Carson made throws. The thing that gets lost in that is I think Kentucky's really, really good on defense. So they provided challenges. It was their Super Bowl. You know, they looked as bad as they could against South Carolina, and they came out and they gave an A effort, and Georgia still did what it needed to do to get the win. But I expect a better Carson Beck. You know, it seemed a little hesitant. Got surprised on some blitzes. The offensive line definitely got some, you know, on the road, it's the living underdown. You know you have that defense to rely on. So I thought he played to the game plan there and then made plays when they had to. So I think the big matchup, obviously both lines of scrimmage, but I think Georgia's going to want to see if that Alabama could tackle in space. Both sides, for that matter. I think that's a big part of the game. You know, you think about these two teams, you think about the defenses. I think the offenses have more than, you know, they're pretty darn capable. So I do expect a lot of. I expect both teams to be in the 20s at least.
What's been the biggest takeaway from your end of being around Nick Saban a lot more, being on the Gameday team? What's the biggest thing you've learned? I guess about
How
him,
smart
about
of a man he is.
Yeah.
I don't care what the topic is. You know, we were talking about other teams, watching tape, NIL. Everything, you know, quarterback situations, people playing different quarterbacks, the thoughts and the experience that he has, and knowing that he can rely on what happened and then it comes to fruition. His conversation last week about Florida and Florida State, where Florida doesn't have any alignment in their university. And that's, you know, you've gone through 5 coaches and none of them have had success. Maybe it's not the coach, you know, but a coach could say that, especially the greatest one of all time. So I mean, smart, every situation, every possible deal that we've come across for a show's sake, he's there and it's outgoing, and when he speaks, there's not a peep in the room. Everybody's trying to get smarter, and it's because of him.
How often do you catch the lighter side of him? Is there moments in between? I know he's really serious, but how often does he kind of show that?
More than I thought. You know, I think we're I don't know if we're intimidated, but there's a lot that comes with college game day. You see the trucks here, you see the sets and the space we take up. There's a lot. And when you go into a room and it's, 12 people on a Zoom call, I think people are, all right, I got to see what I got here. So I think it's just getting comfortable. He's got more comfortable, and gets more fun every week. It's been great.
As a sports betting analyst, what do you expect the spread to kind of look like tomorrow? And if you kind of had to guesstimate, who do you think might have more passing or rushing yards compared to?
It's funny. I was thinking about that with, Coach is going to dial up tomorrow on the show what they did in the SEC championship game with design quarterback runs to offset Georgia's defense. So immediately it made me think, what's Milroe going to run for, right? Because when you tack on the design runs, which you saw at Wisconsin, it's a total headache for the defense. Now, Georgia's had 2 weeks. They got to see some of that against Wisconsin on tape. They know what happened to them in the SEC championship game. I think both quarterbacks are going to throw. I think there's going to be more offense than defense. I just from a playmaker standpoint, this game has it where it feels like, in previous games, all the focus has been on the NFL talent on the defensive side. Now, I saw one thing going into the season. It's totally changed because guys are healthy for Alabama, but Alabama didn't have like one mock first rounder on the defensive side. That's obviously changed with what they've put on the field the first couple weeks. But I said before, I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a pick'em game. That stadium's worth some points for sure. But the talent Georgia has also, and again, the spot that they're in, I don't think Kirby Smart could be in a better situation, knowing that they still are undefeated, but they learned a lot about their team and what they have and maybe what they don't have. So I think adjusting to that, having 2 weeks to prepare is monstrous. So I'd say pick them.
What are some of your favorite props that you've seen? Maybe some interesting props.
I have not. I usually wait till Friday evening to check out that.
Georgia struggled against Kentucky. Do you foresee a different Georgia team tomorrow?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I think a more the offensive line, they roll guys. I know Ratledge is out, but the way they roll guys, I don't think that's going to be that big of a factor. Now, I will say Alabama, the program guys that they have, those are multiple year guys that had a lot of hype coming in, the defensive tackles with Smith and those guys. They played way above what I thought, or what they've put on tape, I would say, in years previous. So that matchup for sure, because when you look at Carson Beck, going back and look at it, he was really uncomfortable. And that was because of Kentucky and what they did. And now Alabama gets to see that. They get to adjust and put their own spin on things. But I think Georgia's offense will be way more focused. I think running the ball will be a priority. When you're down on the road, at Kentucky and they're dicing you up with blitzes, it's hard to get that run game going because you got to throw the football to get back in the game. So I did think you saw what Georgia's real game plan was. I think it would be more focused this week with having some balance and getting their guys the ball. Anybody else? All right. Super easy. Now we got to get this up.